do it. What is happening, everybody, and welcome to another woodworking adventure. I'm so glad everyone tuned in, and I appreciate your support. Special shout out to all my current subscribers, and a very special welcome to those of you just passing through. Thank you very much. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through step by step building a Beachy Vibe coffee and end table set using reclaimed pallet wood. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, feel free to post a comment, hit that like and subscribe button, and here we go. I'll start out by just bringing in some pallets and straightening the nails up with a pry bar, and basically just taking them apart, taking my time, try not to do any damage to the wood that's not already been done, and get all these nails straightened up. And once I get them up straight, I'm just going to lift it up and put a block under it, just kind of, not heavy tapping, but lightly tapping down on a hammer using another block of wood to keep from damaging. And they seem to come apart pretty easy. To the best of my knowledge, these pallets are made out of a eucalyptus wood, and to me it's not the hardest wood I've ever worked with before, but it's not the softest either. But it really looks nice when you get it out, you get it sanded up or planed up. So now headed into the shop, I pull out the Air Locker AP700 nail remover, a couple drops of oil every time I use it, just to keep it lubricated real nice inside. You don't want any moisture setting up. And of course I have my bucket with a towel inside it, and just run through, shoot the nails out. 9 out of 10, most of the nails will go all the way through, depending on the thickness of the board. Other times I just get a pry bar and just no effort at all, the nail just comes straight out. Don't have any problems there. So just continue on every board that I'm going to use for this project, just removing the nails. It's a lot faster than using a hammer, and of course, as always, it's a lot of fun to use. So kind of let's enjoy it. It's kind of like running my planer. It's one of the fun tools I have in my shop, that every time I get a chance to use it, I just kind of got a little grin going on because it's so much fun. It's got a little bit of noise to it, but that's all part of it. And just make sure you have some kind of soft stop, like I have a towel and a bucket, just because the nails will ricochet if they hit another hard surface. But I highly recommend the AP700 by Air Locker. So now for the end tables, I'm just basically drawing a straight line with a square and cutting off a 24 by 24 piece. And all this plywood came off the pallets as well. So it's, sometimes you get slatted pallets, sometimes you get some with the plywood, and that's all this basically is. This is just going to be my bottom to hold my slats in place. So now I got my speed square marked center. I'm just lining up the boards just to kind of get an idea of the pattern I'm going for. And this is kind of going to be like a herringbone. So moving over to the miter saw, I'm cutting off places basically where nail holes were. And make sure you do check all your wood prior to cutting to make sure there are no nails or any kind of metal left over from manufacturing. So, but wherever I can, I try to always remove the nail holes. But it's not always possible, but I always like to if I can. Now for the fun part of running all your planks through the planer. Now if you don't have one of these, this one's relatively inexpensive. It's the 13-inch by Beaver, and I can drop a link to it in the description. So I run them through, get them planed, then I move over to the joiner and just run them through on the edges, just trying to get them all to be uniform, square, and flat, so when you start buttoning them together, making your pattern, you won't have a lot of gaps there. Especially if you're using epoxy, you don't want to have half your project leak down in the cracks and waste it. So I make sure that I get them as flush as possible with each other before installing on my board. So now over to my backer board, I just put my speed square up at the top, and I put the first board up to it. I mark center on this board and just put it even with the point of the speed square, and then I just apply some wood glue and go from there with a brush and just evenly coat it best you can and put them all together and just continue this pattern on Using an 1¼ brad nail, I carelessly put one through my finger. Oh, happy day. So now, after bleeding all over my project and the profanity down to a dull minimum, I continue on putting glue on the back of the boards and just moving on. And toward the end, they start getting shorter, so I always make sure I use the shortest ones I have, because you're going to need your longer ones as you go up toward the top. So I just continue on and using a 1¼ brad nail, I just staple from the top. I originally have stapled from the bottom, but it doesn't look bad at all when you do it from the top. It actually looks like it belongs. So it's a lot faster. So finishing the bottom, I move to the top. Same thing, I'm gluing the boards down. I'm just going to proceed to the end. So when I reach the end and my glue dries, I just flip the project over, and using a circular saw, I just run up the edges and cut off the excess. Now you can use a guide if you wish, but I just freehanded it since I'm going to be trimming it later. So once I've cut the edges off, I just flip it over and take my sander, and I start not with a heavy sandpaper, more lighter. I think I started around like 180, and just knocking down anything that the planer didn't get, which really isn't that much. And again, this is a set, so this is the coffee table you actually see in the video being sanded. And since it is a coffee table, let's stop and have a little coffee break and give her a good testing. Looks good to me. I went in and I painted some of the boards different colors, trying to keep that beach look to it. So now I'm back out here with 220 sandpaper, and I'm just scuffing up the paint a little bit to kind of give it that old weathered look. And I'm going to be going back with clear epoxy, so I'm hoping this is going to turn out great. So now, using a straightening jig and probably the most wobbling table saw I believe I've ever made a cut on, I run my pieces that are going to be my trim edges down it, just trying to get both edges to be pretty straight. So I don't know what was going on with this table saw, but wow. So anyway, so now I'm just running through and I'm cutting them 2 inches wide, and again they'll be trimmed around the outside. So back over to the Viva planer, I run them through, and again, you're not taking a lot of wood off here. I'm basically just taking off the outside roughness just on one side, because you won't see both sides. But I do that just to get them smooth before sanding. So now, using some wood glue and my brad nailer, I just go around the edges, tacking them on, and I wanted them to be kind of an 1/8 up, because my epoxy I will be pouring, I'm basing it on an 1/8 inch thick. So I'm just going around the edges with the brad nailer and keeping my fingers out of the way this time. I put them on, and I have a slide ruler there. I took the slide off because it was an 1/8 inch thick, so I just laid it down on the edges, and it seemed to work pretty good, keeping me uniform and level top and bottom on all these. So just more wood glue. Can't really have too much, but the brad nails, basically just hold this in place until the glue dries anyway. So I don't mind putting a little extra glue on it. And the outside trim does have nail holes. I do like the way that looks. So on the tabletop itself, I tried to avoid nail holes whenever possible. But on the trim, I didn't really care. I kind of wanted it to look like something that you found on the beach and then brought it home and created a table out of it. So now, with the table being complete, I move on to the epoxy process. So starting out, I'm just pouring a seal coat, and I'm using a spreader just to try to get it uniform around into all the little cracks that I may or may not have got with a joiner. So I'm pouring a little bit at a time. I'm not very experienced using epoxy. This is probably the second time I've ever poured epoxy. So watching a bunch of other videos from people, shout out to all those guys. That really helps a lot when you can watch somebody else do it, and you kind of find your own rhythm, I guess, as you go. And it doesn't really have to be that time consuming. Just being a beginner at it, I wanted to make sure I took my time, because I figured less mistakes I make in the initial seal coat, then probably less sanding I'll have to do later. So once this cup's done, I just went ahead and mixed up another cup and came back and poured in and filled in a lot of the places where it had gaps or it didn't, go to the exact spaces that I intended for it to. There's also a glare coming in the back window of the shop, so that made it a little difficult on me to start with. Because when you start looking, it looks like there's some imperfections there when it's really not. But it just, the glare and the changing of the sun outside kind of made it look that way. So once I realized that, it's really just kind of just took a lot of the thinking and nerves away, worried about pouring it. So after about 20 minutes or so, the bubbles had all seemed to have risen to the top. There wasn't that many because I did have a good seal in between my boards, but I went back with a heat gun and just lightly brushing over, not staying in one place too long. So with all the bubbles out, I let them cure for about 24 to 48 hours, and the result was absolutely amazing.
Only thing left to do now is ship them to their final destination and install the legs. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.